Welcome back to Effigies of Power from Meet the Muse, a series exploring how England's monarchs were remembered, immortalized, and laid to rest in sculpted splendor. So let's quickly remind ourselves what a funeral effigy was. By the late Middle Ages, English monarchs were laid to rest, not just with ceremony, but with art. A life-size sculpture, often laid atop the coffin, was created to represent the deceased in their final days of majesty. The effigy would lie in state, travel in procession, and rest above the coffin beneath a towering hearse structure, adorned with candles, heraldry, and prayer. This is episode 2. Let's meet the man who founded the Tudor dynasty, King Henry VII. He ruled England for 24 years, and his descendants still sit on the throne today. His beginnings? Unlikely. His Welsh father, Edmund Tudor, was a half-brother of King Henry VI, born to a courtier and the widowed queen, Catherine of Valois. Edmund died before his son was even born. Henry's mother, Margaret Beaufort, was just 13 years old when she gave birth to him. He spent most of his early life in exile. No one expected him to wear a crown. His claim came from his mother's line, the Beauforts, but it was a weak claim with too much room to be challenged. So Henry didn't press that claim. He didn't claim kingship through his future wife, Elizabeth of York, either. Instead, he claimed the crown by conquest. At the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, Henry's forces defeated King Richard III, whose death on the field ended both his reign and the War of the Roses. Now, King Henry VII doesn't get the attention his son does, King Henry VIII, or his granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth I. But I'd argue he's one of the most underrated kings in English history. He was a perfectionist, intentional, careful. He enforced the law, managed money with obsession, and stayed deeply involved in the day-to-day running of his kingdom. But he wasn't just cold strategy. He could be surprisingly empathetic for his time. Still, he was insecure on the throne. He had to be. Every move was calculated to secure the new Tudor dynasty and hold the crown in place. His marriage to Elizabeth of York, uniting the Red Rose of Lancaster and the White Rose of York, was more than just symbolic. It brought peace. It brought legitimacy. It brought stability. Henry died just 6 years after his wife Elizabeth, at only 52. But he left behind something powerful, a secure dynasty, a stable realm, and a legacy still waiting for its moment in the spotlight. Is a stable kingship a boring kingship? In my opinion, with the right film, Henry VII could be just as captivating as the Tudors we think we know. What remains of King Henry VII's funeral effigy is his bust, and today you can see it at Westminster Abbey. It's likely the best preserved and most carefully restored of all the royal effigies on display. This one is strikingly lifelike. Most experts agree a death mask was likely used to capture his true features. When examined in 1907, it was in remarkable condition. The wooden head and bust were once attached to a full-sized body, standing 6 feet 1 inch tall. The body had a wooden core, padded with hay and other materials, and among that hay, examiners found flowers still tucked inside. But the effigy didn't survive the 20th century unscathed. During World War II, it suffered major damage. The body could not be repaired, even the nose had to be reconstructed. Discoloration was another major issue. R.P. Howgrave Graham, a restoration expert on the effigies, wrote, "Flakes of paint could be blown off with the breath, and the whole color, even of the flakes, was a uniform dark gray." So what can we learn from this restoration process? Here's more from Howgrave Graham. The new plaster, round the neck, was painted, and the black on the head and bust was renewed where lost. The hair is a mixture of bright red and gray, and is human. It occurs to me as barely possible that it comes from the king's head. He had a fine mass of it at the time the Victoria and Albert Museum bust was made. In any case, it is yet another instance of the extreme care used to obtain true portraiture. If that hair truly belonged to Henry, it offers an intimate clue. A blend of red and gray suggests he may have once had auburn or reddish hair. Portraits of Henry often show him with dark brown or auburn tones, but many historians today believe he was red-haired, just like several of his descendants. That famous Tudor redhead gene may not have only come from Elizabeth of York. It may have come from Henry too. Contemporary accounts also describe his eyes as small and either gray or blue. In the reconstructions you'll see here, I've included a range of hair and eye colors because the truth is, we still don't know for certain. But with this effigy, with what remains, we get closer to the man who once wore the crown, closer to the real face behind the legend. King Henry VII died at Richmond Palace on April 21, 1509. After lying in state at Richmond, his body was taken to St. Paul's Cathedral, where he lay in state once more, before continuing on to Westminster Abbey for burial. At every stage of the journey, a wooden effigy, dressed in regal robes and crowned, was placed atop the coffin, giving the powerful impression the king still lay in majesty. At Westminster Abbey, the coffin and effigy were set beneath a towering funeral hearse, an elaborate wooden structure illuminated by hundreds of flickering candles. This was not merely a display of pageantry. The effigy served a vital function. It allowed the people to grieve their king in full splendor. Here's a glimpse from a contemporary account describing the procession from Richmond to London, according to a contemporary chronicler. Over the body was an image or representation of the late king, laid on cushions of gold, apparelled in his rich robes of estate, with crown on his head, ball and scepter in his hand, environed with banners of arms of all his dominions, titles, genealogies, and thus the chariot being ordered. The chapel with the prelate went praying, and all others in black mourning, with innumerable torches, proceeded in good order from Richmond to London. This wasn't just any display of royal regalia. Henry's effigy did not wear coronation robes, but instead the rich parliamentary garments traditionally worn for state occasions. This choice was symbolic, emphasizing his role as a law-giving sovereign, the unifier of the realm, rather than a monarch appointed by divine right. According to the detailed accounts, his effigy was dressed in a gown of purple satin as the base layer, draped with a mantle of deep purple velvet, richly trimmed with ornate lace, evoking majesty, dignity, and solemnity. A scepter in his right hand, and a golden orb in his left, and on his head, a crown, completing the image of kingship. One of the most remarkable artifacts from his funeral still survives. A golden cloth that once lay over his coffin beneath the towering hearse is now preserved at the University of Cambridge. A contemporary account described it. In Westminster Church was a marvelously curious great hearse of 9 principals, full of light, taken out of the choir with 6 lords and set under the hearse, the representation lying upon the coffin on a pall of gold. This cloth is stunning and deeply symbolic. According to Cambridge's description, the fabric is made of cloth of gold and cut velvet, with a silk warp and gold thread weft. The motifs are brocaded in a serpentine pattern, typical of ceremonial textiles from the late 15th century. Decorative red velvet bands feature alternating emblems, the Tudor rose and the portcullis. The rose symbolized the union of Lancaster and York. The portcullis referenced Henry's mother, Margaret Beaufort, whose influence helped shape the Tudor legacy. In life, Henry was cautious, calculating, often understated, but in death he was displayed in grandeur, worthy of a king who united a fractured kingdom. Bathed in candlelight, beneath a canopy of velvet and gold, he was mourned as the founder of a new era, and for a moment, through that effigy, he remained. Did any of these funeral images bring you back to Tudor England, to a time of solemn mourning as the old king was laid to rest and a new one rose in his place? I've numbered several of the effigy reconstructions, so you can share your thoughts in the comments below. Which image was your favorite? Did any of them capture Henry VII as you've imagined him? Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is so appreciated from a new channel like this one, so you don't miss our next reveal. If you haven't already seen our first episode on Queen Elizabeth of York, now is the perfect time to go back and watch. Her effigy, restored in regal detail, offers a powerful companion to this one, and together they tell the story of the first Tudor king and queen as they were remembered in death. Thank you for watching.